I've known Sunflower now, I think, for 3 years, and I'm just so impressed with her diligence to always grow and learn, and her wisdom that she brings into her interpersonal relationships and her following as well. And I'm really just honored to have her here. Thanks, Sunflower.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you so much, Aliko and Lux. I really appreciate that introduction. I'd really like to just open our space by sharing a prayer and really inviting us all to kind of come into the same shared frequency and shared field through the power of this prayer. And so with that, I just invite you to come home into your body in whatever way you feel relaxed, you feel at ease. Maybe you don't feel relaxed or at ease, but I welcome you to come into presence even with that. See if you can hold some softness with that and whatever you have happening for you in your body right now. And maybe just taking a few deep breaths. As we recognize and remember that each breath that we get to have in this life is a true moment of connection to spirit and to the divine. With the gift of breath in my throat and lungs and moving between my lips, I give gratitude for this beautiful, wondrous creation of the all that is. For Great Spirit, for Prime Creator Source, Mother, Father, Sioux God, our divine parentage, this wholeness that always has been and always will be the truth of all things. Thank you so much, Great Beloved, for this day, for the gift of our lives, the gift of being a part of it here in this wondrous creation of yours, for all its shades, dark and light, for all the suffering and all the joy, for the whole journey. Thank you for the opportunity for us to gather together from many different places to bring our consciousness and our awareness and our hearts and souls and spirits and bodies into a shared field of energy to explore sovereign divinity and how this is a part of the healing for us all, to heal our cultures, to heal the trauma that we've all inherited and continue to repeat in our world. A special prayer for healing and liberation of all of our Black brothers and sisters and kin. Special prayer for healing and liberation for all the Indigenous kin, for all of the people of color in the world who are experiencing and have been experiencing for so long such immense suffering at the hands of white supremacy. Calling on a prayer for peace and love to be felt and known within all hearts, and that we may share within this peace and love together in a way that is equitable and healing and real and true. May you help us to be vehicles and vessels for this transformation of culture and consciousness within our own beings and within our families and friends and relationships and communities, and ultimately spreading this vibration and this truth, this new cultural co-creation throughout the world. Thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for this moment, and this moment, and this moment, and this moment, and the onward continuation of all things into the infinite spiraling fractal nature of this dream. Thank you for being present with us always. We connect with the truth of spirit in our hearts, in our bodies, in our minds, and in our breath. May we be of humble service to the truth of love and to the liberation of all beings. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is. And I invite you just to take a moment, and whether that be out loud where you are or just energetically in your body or within your mind, just add a word, add a feeling, add a sound, add a vibration to that prayer that you would like to add in for our collective healing and liberation. Thank you so much for taking the time to just really be present there. May our prayer continue, and may our life be that prayer. May this space that we share today be that prayer. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alicia Sunflower, and what I'm sharing today, this topic of cultural and collective trauma healing through reclaiming our sovereign divinity, is really something that has been in the works for me for many years. And what I'm presenting is my own understanding of where we are, what reality is, and parts of the puzzle pieces of what is needed for us to all move together in a way that is healing, so that we can create a world that is far better for our descendants than the world that we have all inherited together. So with all that, I want to share with you a little bit of my background so you can know how I came to these truths that I'm sharing that are my truths, and they may not be yours. And part of my truth is I welcome that as well, because no one of us has all of the answers, and we're going to need all of us to co-create this new reality, this new earth together. So you can know a little bit about my perspective and where it comes from. I have some formal education within the traditional Western sense that has helped to inform my awareness and my understanding. I have a bachelor's in psychology and sociology, a master's in mental health counseling, and presently I am in a doctorate program for clinical psychology with a focus on transformational leadership and somatic psychology. So outside of all of that years of formal education, I've also rebelled from that formal education and sought to continue to explore myself and spirit and reality through many different learnings, many different teachers. Since I was about 14 years old, so about 16 years ago, I really started to become an avid learner within the realm of spirit, and much more philosophically, metaphysically at that time. But as I continued on my path and I've explored many different wisdom traditions, I have found, especially so, that shamanism is one that calls to me, what's commonly known as shamanism. And I found that path in 2016. And when I first learned about it, it just helped me understand myself. It was the first time I had heard a tradition or a way of knowing or being and relating in the world reflect to me so much of how I just feel and experience the world. And so with that, in 2016, I started to explore shamanism. And I ended up going into the path of core shamanism from the Foundation of Shamanic Studies for a little while, which is where I found my first shamanic teacher who I apprenticed with, Kuya Lemskiwai. And then also later on, I found Joanne Green, who I apprenticed with for a time as well. Outside of that, I've had a number of different kinds of trainings within energy medicine and some different ways of intuitively working with energy. I've also reawoken a lot of my own intuitive gifts and found those throughout my studies. And I also have been really learning a lot about different forms of ancient wisdom, such as Gnosticism and the Essenes, as I'm a rose priestess I found upon my path. And there are many different ancient forms of esoteric wisdom in that path that are a part of my understanding of all things. And also, I've also learned a lot about reality from the indigenous wisdom keepers in the world. And while I have great respect, so much deep gratitude for the indigenous speakers and wisdom holders of the world, what I teach is not inherently that. And I do my best not to appropriate those practices. I'm definitely someone who is still in my process of learning. And so this theory I'm presenting today is not complete. And I'm welcome to your feedback so that this theory may continue to grow and evolve as it needs to be. I think also it's important to mention on the personal side of things, I am a trauma survivor, and that's really been a big part of how I have been seeking these answers, seeking myself. And as I've been seeking to become a healer for others, I've also found out how to be a healer for myself. And as I've healed myself more, I figured out how to help other people heal more. And the two just really spiral with each other. So I have a deep history of abuse, childhood sexual abuse, and lots of emotional, psychological, and spiritual abuse that I've had throughout my life. And all of that has really also been a part of, in the end, me finding my path of spirit. And it has been my devotion to spirit and the strength of my spirituality and my relationship to the all that is, and how I connect and understand and listen and receive, that has been a major part of my ability to heal my trauma, and continues to be my greatest ally as I do shadow work, and on the personal level, on the ancestral level, and working in the collective and cultural level as well. So spirit is really the center of everything from my perspective, and it is the center of what I'm talking about today. So this whole idea of sovereign divinity can't really be discussed if we do not talk about spirit as the truth of all things, as the center of all things. I'd like to just kind of explain a little bit about how I see that in terms of how it relates to sovereign divinity. Within the truth of all things, with the truth of the all that is, we are all one being. As crazy as that seems, because here we are, all of us in our different locations and our different bodies and our different screens and our different backgrounds, our different sensations, all these things, we are many. We are a diverse many, yet somehow we are all this one. And we can look to understandings like the quantum field understanding, which recognizes we all have an electromagnetic field that we create. All things have these electromagnetic fields, and all electromagnetic fields overlap. And in that, there is one unified field between all of the interconnection of everything. Behind me on the wall here, you can actually see this is a really important form of sacred geometry. This is the flower of life. This is a representation of that unified field that includes the many overlapping individual fields as well. So being able to understand that we are beings of energy. We do have matter, but all of that matter is energy as well. And that outside of our individual manifestations, there is this one truth of spirit that permeates all things. That is the creator of all things. This physical substance that we're made of, the energetic substance that we're made of, all comes from that same source. We are embodied creators here in this reality. And part of how I see this reality is it is a morphogenetic, holographic, co-creative field wherein we are the truth of creator put into these bodies at this level of consciousness that can be aware of itself, be aware of the truth of all things, and become co-creators of that ultimate dream of spirit. This is a dream simulation. We are all dreaming of different perspectives of our creator within the creation that the creator is dreaming. It has a lot of layers like that. Part of you may have heard within the prayer part of why that is the fractal nature of all of reality. The fractal, as it expands, it still holds that same core beginning within it. We are like these, deeply layered fractal expressions of that core fractal. So that truth, that ultimate truth that has somehow created this amazing manifestation, this amazing dreamscape, this amazing earth plane, that this is the truth of us when we get out of our own way, that our sovereign divinity is the recognition, the remembrance of who we are beyond ego, beyond self, beyond separate self, the remembering that we are spirit, that we are creator. So why don't we just remember that already, right? Why don't we just come in and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Hello, this is my dream. This is your dream. We're dreaming. I'm you, you, me. We're all one. We don't necessarily have that, because an aspect of participating in the dream is that we must be somewhat asleep to the truth of the unity of all things to be able to engage in this illusion of separateness. The illusion of separateness is in of itself a gift, because how could I experience me being here on this screen and you being there on that screen, and the beauty of trees and the sky and the earth and all of the diverse manifestations of life, if I fully remembered right off the get-go that it was all illusion? I would just wake up. So there is an aspect that is needed within this dream experience that we call life, that we fall into this illusion of separation. And the first form of that illusion of separation that happens is when we are manifest outside of spirit, when we fall from spirit. All of these words only point to it, and none of them can actually quite describe it. But there was this piece in time where the gift and love and joy of spirit had a desire to have this experience, to know itself, to love itself, to remember itself. So ultimately, it had to forget itself in some way to remember itself. And in that moment of separation, to participate within this dreamscape illusion, there was a sense of loss, a sense of forgetting, and an immediate desire for the union that is, to remember it, to experience it once again. So core within our beings, as being a part of this dream simulation, is the desire for union. It's actually what holds this whole reality together. And we can see that in many different ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the call. But it's important to recognize that although we are this one, we are this many, and that this is the greatest gift we could ever receive, to be able to participate in this dream. And the forgetting, while a part of it, is not the end of it. Ultimately, we are also meant to remember who we are. We have been gifted with this form, these bodies, this kind of consciousness, this social interconnectedness. We have been gifted with all of this so that we can be here, alive, awake, and aware within this dream simulation. Ultimately, so that we can remember, hey, we created this, to enjoy it, to create heaven on earth, to be in the truth of love that we are, living it and experiencing it in relationship to each other. And if you think about it, how could there be a greater gift of love than creators saying, I want to experience myself and love myself so much that I'm going to create this whole illusion for me to explore that and be that. Of course, part of that is the forgetting. And we live in a time where we have fallen deeply into the forgetting, deeply into the illusion of separation. to the point where collectively we have forgotten the truth of union, the truth of unity that is all things. We have forgotten to love and care for one another as if we were loving and caring for ourselves. And we can see as we look back into human history that this is something that has been evolving over time. And if we look way back into ancient human history, and there are lots of debates about what we have recorded and about how we are taught about ancient history within the mainstream Western paradigm. But even if we look back to what is agreed upon, we can see that there was a certain time when things shifted. We look back to the ancient Egyptians, and they had an understanding of the spirit of all things, of equality, of balance, that there is a oneness within the duality that is the base of it. Yet things shifted. We can see it that at that time, a disease of consciousness came into humanity. And this is a disease of consciousness which has spread the illusion of separation to the point in which it is causing immense suffering. This disease of consciousness is, as I see it, the disease of supremacy. It's a part of a paradigm of domination and control, where certain aspects of this dream have sought to have dominance over others and to control the reality. And that this has been fed by this need to find superiority. And this really stems from this belief of inferiority. And if you think back to it, the truth of all things is this unity, this diverse fractal manifestation of this unity, but this inherent unity nonetheless. Nothing is above or below anything. All things are equal. All things are kin. All things are sacred reflections and manifestations of the one true source God. But somewhere along the line, this sickness entered into the human collective consciousness, this sickness of supremacy, this belief that some are above and some are below. And in this sickness bred a fear of inferiority, a fear of unworthiness, and all of the creation of systems and cultures of domination and control have been to secure a sense of this supremacy, as if to prove it. And this disease of consciousness, you can look back in the history and see that even when cultures were not necessarily connected across the world as they are today, this disease of consciousness has spread. And I believe that that is a part of the overall shifting of consciousness and energy on Gaia herself. Again, looking back on many different ancient wisdom teachings, we can see and understand that there is a larger cycle of time, a larger cycle of consciousness, in which consciousness shifts from its polarity, from in its duality, and we move from that remembrance of who we are and deeper into the forgetting is one aspect of that shift of polarity. And at that time, it was the time for us to move more deeply into forgetting, and this disease of consciousness spread throughout humanity. This paradigm of domination and control spread through humanity as certain people and certain cultures within the earth developed and were infected with this disease and operated in paradigms of domination and control. They sought out other cultures and other peoples and other ways of life that lived within shared power and not power over, that lived in partnership and not domination, and they sought to destroy them. That is commonly known as colonization. And colonization became an important tool, an important medium for spreading this disease and infecting humanity. Other prominent aspects of the disease of supremacy that we are well aware of are the patriarchy and white supremacy. Forms of the disease of supremacy that also exist include able-bodiedism, heteronormativity, holding up the gender binary. Anytime that we put some aspect of energy, of body, of personality, of sexuality, of being, of way of knowing and relating and connecting to the world as above another, we are running face to face with the disease of supremacy. And today in our world, especially now at this time, we are waking up to this disease. It has been unfolding for generations because there are many people who have been very oppressed by this disease and have been speaking up about it for many years. And with all that have been oppressed, there have also been many of us that have been privileged by this disease, given advantages. I myself have had many advantages in my life because of the white privilege I hold. And white supremacy has given me a value above people of black and brown and colored skin. And because of that, I move through the world in a way that by POC do not. Because of those privileges, I have also been blind for a lot of my life to white supremacy and that manifestation of the disease of supremacy. However, I'm also a woman, and I have experienced a lot of trauma through the patriarchy, through sexual abuse and emotional abuse, and the ways that being a woman and inheriting this body and being told that I'm a certain way in gender, I've experienced the disease of supremacy very readily within this way. And so for all of us, we have different advantages and privileges, and we have different levels of oppression. Where we hold oppression in our lives, and all of us to some degree or another experience oppression at the hands of the disease of supremacy, where we hold that, we are aware of it. There's no doubt about it. Where we hold privilege within this diseased paradigm is where we become blinded to it, where we do not see the disease because we benefit from it. That is where it has infected us deeply within our minds, within our hearts. That's the proliferation of this disease. Not only has it become a paradigm within governmental policies and culture, but it has become something that is embedded deep within us, within our own minds, within our own bodies, within our consciousness, within our psyches. And as we are now in this time of great shifting of the cycles, moving from a time of forgetting into a time of awakening, and we can readily see that happening across the world as so many people with white privilege are finally waking up to the very real disease of white supremacy and institutionalized and systematic racism, and how that has not gone away and it is still very much here today. The Me Too movement helped awaken people's eyes to the truth of the patriarchy. You know, we are in Pride Month. Pride was a riot. There was a need to rebel against the oppression of the LGBTQ community by the disease of supremacy, which holds heteronormativity as the norm and is superior to anything else. So there is this awakening that has been moving through our consciousness and is speeding up now, which is really a very good thing, because that means that we are moving towards our liberation. However, this is not necessarily a straightforward or easy thing. For all of us, we have, again, different areas of oppression, different areas of privilege within ourselves. And the oppression opens us up to seeing the truth of the disease, and at the same time, the privilege acts as a defense. It's like an ingrained aspect of this virus that protects itself, that has embedded itself within our consciousness. within our psyches and within our culture. So one part of how we all wake up to the truth of the disease of supremacy that is rampant within our world and has wreaked havoc on peoples all over the world, on all peoples, and on the earth herself and all ecosystems. We begin to recognize it as we awaken to healing. Again, for many of us who do not hold privileges within this cultural paradigm, who are oppressed, there has been a vast awareness of the disease of supremacy since day one, because there have been personal and cultural traumas that are experienced every day in their lived experience that reveal to them the truth of the disease of supremacy and the need to do something about it. For those of us who have had different privileges, we tend to find that we open up to recognizing this disease of supremacy through our own personal healing, because we do not experience the same levels of oppression of cultural healing. Now, we do all experience oppression on cultural trauma from the disease of supremacy. One such way is at this core way, when we go back to what the disease of supremacy teaches us, is it teaches us that some are superior, some are inferior, some ways of being are superior, some ways of being are inferior. And so we all live within a cultural soup of this constant fear of not being worthy enough. That there are very strict rules for belonging. There are ways that we can be to belong, and there are ways that we can't be to belong. And if we step out of those approved pathways for belonging, we all experience very harsh consequences for that. Some of us much harsher consequences for that. Some of us experience consequences just for being, as we are told by the color of our skin, or the ways that we look, or the families that we were born into, the religions that we practice, that you already aren't good enough to exist. Sorry. I mean, the insanity of this, right? But all of us have been impacted by this disease, and all of us carry within ourselves places where we have to try to mitigate and conform to and cope with this constant fear of unworthiness. And as we begin to face this within ourselves, we begin to realize the truth of this disease, and we begin to heal it. So an important part of what is going to be a collective cultural trauma healing is engaging in our own personal healing. And this is where we go back to the truth of all things. You are creator. You are God incarnate. You are goddess. You are spirit. You are the creatrix of this creation. You only need to remember that. But the places where the disease has you is where you do not remember that. To move into our sovereign divinity, to remember that we are sovereign, that we are the creators of this whole dream, of this whole reality. When we can do that, we find internal freedom. We find our power to be able to show up in the world as that truth of love, as that truth of spirit. And when we are in our sovereign divinity, there is nothing that can prevent us from creating the good in the world. But the degree to which we are suffering, where we are stuck in that illusion of separation, where we are suffering deeply from that illusion of separation, those are the places where we are not stepping into our sovereign divinity. So ultimately, the path to liberation for us all begins within. To seek out the places where we believe in this disease, where this disease has embedded itself into us, into our bodies, into our minds, into our hearts, into our ways of relating, into our ways of perceiving, into our ways of thinking. And as we do that, as we face this disease within us, and we heal it with the truth of spirit, the truth of love, we are able to remember who we are, come into an embodied experience of that remembrance. And then we are able to show up into the world in ways that will help us to co-create a culture of peace and love, of partnership and harmony, of balance, of right relationship, and a recognition of the spirit within all things. So we want to change the systems within the world so that we can heal our cultural trauma and stop re-traumatizing ourselves, especially marginalized and oppressed populations. So what is it that we need to do? Well, we need to recognize that culture is the soup that we are all swimming in. We are like little pieces of this fractal whole, moving and swimming in this shared field of culture. We are marinating and absorbing culture. And we are also helping to marinate the culture that we are swimming in. So what that really means is we need to start to shape and shift culture. So how do we shape culture? What do we need to do in order to do that? Well, what we really need to do is we need to understand how culture is created. That this is actually happening in a co-creative fashion. So that's where we're going to talk about the co-creative cycle of culture. And while I'm going to discuss this in kind of steps, it's important to understand that this, like all things, is actually a spiral. And that this is a very interactive experience and not very linear. But unfortunately, part of the ways that we communicate and conceptualize the things within our current paradigm is linearly. So we're going to explore how this co-creative cycle of culture works, breaking it down into some important points. So first things first, we are already starting to be a part of absorbing and co-creating culture when we are in our mother's womb. Okay, at that time, we are in a world of water, and we are being inundated with electromagnetic frequencies from our mother, from the world and people and things around her. We are being inundated with psychic energy coming from our own mother's consciousness and spirit, as well as other people and things and beings all around her. And how she is experiencing the world has a direct impact on the expression of our genetics. And this is a field of science known as epigenetics. In actuality, our bodies, our genetics have been impacted by our grandparents, because the eggs that you grew inside of, the egg that you grew inside of inside your mother's womb was formed when she was inside her mother. And so we directly inherit our parents and our grandparents, our ancestors' experiences of life through epigenetics. And epigenetics, if you aren't familiar, very briefly, is the study of genetics that shows us that genes do not create our reality. Rather, our perception of our reality impacts our genes and turns on different genes for wellness or for sickness based on the neurotransmitters that are sent because of our perception of reality. So this is already happening for us. As we are inside our mother, we are absorbing the culture. And we are shifting our mother's experience of life. And that is shifting for her, part of her experience and what she's bringing forth into culture. So part of what it means that we are experiencing the epigenetic transmission of our grandparents when we are in our mother's womb, we need to understand that we are the physical and spiritual embodiments of our ancestors. Okay, physically, our bodies are the most current expression, evolutionary expression of our ancestors. There's no way that any of us has our bodies without our ancestors. We are physically them, and we are spiritually them. We have direct spiritual cords that tie us to all of our ancestors. And within the fractal nature of consciousness itself, we are in the same fractal. We are not separate. We experience ourselves as individual souls, yet the truth of the soul is that it is something that is much less individualized. Often people will have experiences of past lives where were their ancestors. And part of that reason is because they are a part of the same fractal soul that has manifested itself into humanity for many, many, many lifetimes. So we are the physical and the spiritual embodiments of our ancestors. And as soon as we're born into this physical world, we start developing and learning and absorbing memetics that our ancestors co-created. Now, if you can understand the concept of gene, you can understand the concept of meme. Gene is like a type of information and a way to pass it on. That's essentially what a meme is as well. So those can be very simple, something like how you hold a pen or a pencil, to as complex and complicated as the meme of doing brain surgery. Okay, so we are constantly communicating to each other in memes and expressing and recreating memes. And when we are born and we become infants, we already start to experience and absorb and learn and help develop the psychological, cultural, and relational memes that our ancestors co-created. That's a part of being born into this cultural soup that we exist in. Another important part to understand about even our physiology is that we are wired for relating. You know, going back to the discussion of the truth of all things, our whole reality, from the subatomic level and to the ways that particles seek each other out and interact, to the cosmic level and the way that gravitational fields and magnetic fields work and how light travels, there is an inherent desire for union. And part of how we experience that as people is our desire to be in relationship with one another, to have intimacy and connection. And even our brains, our neurophysiology is wired for this. We all have mirror neurons, which is also known as empathy neurons, which help us to witness and experience and feel within ourselves, within our own hearts and bodies and minds, what other people are feeling. Okay, and that is a part of this hardwired for relating. We're always, 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 everything in this creation is designed to bring us back into union, ultimately. So part of what it is to live in the current world that we live in is we don't recognize this core desire for union. We aren't taught about this. We don't have a culture, for the most part, for many of us, that teaches us about this truth of reality. And so it's a subconscious desire. We don't readily know of it and acknowledge it. And instead of knowing that we're seeking our union with spirit in all things, we end up seeking out this desire for union through approved avenues for belonging. And we are taught what is approved avenue, both explicitly and implicitly, through our cultures. And we learn these rules for belonging through our families, through media, teachers, peers, and communities. And it is important to note that within our cultural paradigm that we live in today, the rules for belonging are based on the disease of supremacy. So inherently, there is a risk. Belonging is not assured within this cultural paradigm that we live in. It is something that we have to earn. We don't automatically belong because we have forgotten this truth of spirit in all things. So with that, we become the wardens. Okay, we become our own wardens. As we learn the price for disobeying the strict rules for belonging, we internalize the practices of repression and shame. These are key components to how the disease of supremacy works. And so while we maybe got explicit and implicit messages like, you shouldn't be too loud, don't say too much, don't say the wrong thing, don't express yourself, was the message that we got. And we learned that from the way people responded to us without words and with words. Now we know there's certain ways that I can express myself, and I better not be too much or too loud. And so we repress ourselves. We mediate our experience and do not allow ourselves to have the expression that's naturally coming through ourselves, and we shame ourselves for that experience. Now, this is a trauma response, okay? This is a trauma response, the fact that we are engaging in this repression and shame, because this is an inherent trauma that all of us experience within this diseased paradigm of domination, control, and supremacy, this not belonging, not being good enough, not making the cut in some way. And so we all begin to internalize and repress ourselves because we are responding to the trauma of not belonging. And so on the physical level, this for us causes an increase in our heart rate and our anxiety, the cortisol levels, and a decrease in our immune system. So already our body is put in a much more vulnerable place. Simultaneously, this also triggers subconscious beliefs, which act as established truths like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, my voice isn't important, I am wrong to want to express myself. And this can then trigger the mind to generate ego defenses, where then we start creating stories about this and start to try to figure out how to cope with that through the way that we experience ourselves. And at the same time, this triggers for us different kinds of affect, different kinds of emotions, such as grief, anger, fear, or shame. And unfortunately, but not surprisingly, within the diseased paradigm of supremacy and power and domination and control, grief, anger, fear, and shame are not really allowed. There are a few small ways, perhaps, that we are allowed to express that. But on the most part, we are not allowed to have those if we are to belong within this disease paradigm. And so we all learn in different ways to suppress these feelings or to express them reactively. For example, men are often allowed to express anger in very big ways, and that's a part of proving their masculinity and their manliness, right? That's part of the boxes that the disease of supremacy has put men inside of. Meanwhile, men are not allowed to express things like sadness, and that is something then that has to be deeply suppressed. So what happens when we engage in this experience of having a trauma response being triggered, even as simply as a fear of not belonging, and certainly as extreme as racial oppression, we then begin to have this experience where this is happening to us a lot. And when this physical, subconscious, mental, and emotional experience of suffering and distress is sustained, over time, it begins to become a mood. We carry it around for days and weeks, and now it's our mood. And when that continues for weeks and months, it becomes our temperament. And people just say, oh, they're kind of like that. And when we carry that for months and years, that becomes a personality trait. And then over time, that will become our personality. And our personality is basically our identity, who we believe we are as an individual, our projection of self into the world, and our pattern and programs. And as we all develop these personalities, it's like a defense mechanism that has been ingrained into our whole experience of self to deal with this fear of not belonging and unworthiness that is caused by the disease of supremacy. And when we together create and develop our personalities, because no man is an island, we do not live in a vacuum. So as we create personalities, we create them in tandem with others around us, our friends, our families, our communities. and we develop these personalities together, then personality types begin to emerge from the culture, and they start to reinforce one another, and then that becomes our culture. Okay, so we have this culture that tells us there's a certain right way of being and lots of ways that are not good to be, and this impacts us, this traumatizes us. We adjust to how we can deal with this trauma response in the ways that we're told are approved avenues that we could possibly deal with this, and it becomes ingrained within us so much over time. It becomes aspects of our personality. We co-create these personalities together as people, and that becomes our culture. When there's a group consensus of different kinds of mimetics for relating that are developed within this diseased cultural waters of the disease of supremacy, that becomes culture. And out of culture, again, ripples more of the rules for belonging. And that includes our norms and practices, traditions, expectations, power and control structures, institutions, narratives, archetypes. All of these begin to reflect back to us our own internal experience. There is this co-creative synergistic relationship between these. And to the degree that these rules for belonging are unconscious, that they are unconsciously unhealed byproducts of cultural trauma, to the point that we don't realize that this comes from cultural trauma, we will continue to perpetuate and repeat that trauma. And that is where we have been for so very long. And as the culture agrees upon these rules for belonging, our media, our schools, our families, our governments, our religions, our communities, our economic systems all continue to transmit to us the recycled and renewed and recreated cultural trauma. So the degree to which we are unconscious and unaware of this whole cycle and how culture impacts us and our own trauma and how we are helping to co-create the culture that continues to traumatize us by responding to that traumatized culture in a way that continues to traumatize us. That is where we get stuck. That is where we are. And that it doesn't end there with our own personal lives, because we pass on to our descendants any of the work that we do to heal this, or any of the work we do not do to heal this cultural trauma. And because of reincarnation, and because of the truth of spirit not being any one thing, we will directly re-inherit this, because we will reincarnate again as our own descendants into the cultural paradigm, to ultimately, hopefully, not continue this re-traumatization, but to heal ourselves. Culture is what we are made of. There is no separation from that. We have our own cultures within, and these are reflections of the cultures without, and the cultures without are reflections and manifestations of the cultures within. We are in this endless co-creative cycle of the energy of the all that is, which we can see as a rainbow, because it includes all colors, all frequencies, and it is harmonic. It is a fractal of light and dark. This is an endless co-creative fractal of frequencies moving through consciousness and through life. And we will again return and return and return as emanations and manifestations of this co-creative consciousness, ultimately to remember who we are and to heal ourselves from our forgetting and this mass hypnotic illusion of forgetting that we have been stuck in because of this paradigm of domination and control and the disease of supremacy. So how do we shape culture? Well, we can't not shape it, is part of the point. We are constantly shaping it. Every time you interact with anyone or anything, you are being a part of culture formation. You are actively helping to create culture, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. We're constantly doing it. And if we want to shape a culture for cultural trauma healing, for the liberation of all beings on Gaia, we need truth. First and foremost, we need the truth. That means the truth of all things, the truth of our inherent oneness, but also the truth of this paradigm that we've been living in. Too long have we been asleep and forgetting, hypnotized by this collective ancestral trauma, keeping us locked in the illusion of separation and the illusion of this disease. So it is important that we come home to the truth of both of these things. The truth of the world that we live in and how it lives inside of us. The truth of all the many places that the disease of consciousness is within us. And the truth that our ultimate nature, our truest essence, our deepest self is source, is creator, is great spirit. When we can hold two of these truths, both of these truths together, we will find the motivation and the dedication and the key element that we need, because the truth will set us free. And it is only in truth that we can find our freedom for ourselves and for each other, for this whole world. So we also need a certain level of openness and curiosity. A part of this disease, as I spoke to a little bit before, is all of its defensiveness. There are so many defenses inherent within the disease of supremacy that keep those who are privileged within this system of paradigm of domination and control from having to look at it. So we need to be open to recognizing that so much of what we have been fed about who we are and how the world is and who they are and how things work and what reality is likely not true, or maybe only slightly true. We need to be open to rediscovering the truth of things. We need to be open to looking within ourselves, and we need to do so with curiosity, with that curiosity of spirit who has put forth this whole creation to in part see what's going to happen. So to really investigate ourselves with openness and curiosity without a belief of I already know how it is, or it's this way, or it's not that way, and I'm this person and I'm not that person. We need to be open and curious about, well, how has this impacted me? Where do I hold on to beliefs in supremacy? Where do I hold beliefs of racism? Where do I hold beliefs of sexism? Where do I hold beliefs of homophobia? Where do I hold beliefs of ableism? We all need to be open and curious with the disease within ourselves and with the truth of spirit in all things. We also need to be embodied. We need to come home into our bodies. A part of experiencing trauma is a disconnection from body, because body becomes not safe, whether that be because physical things have happened to this body or the emotional experience of emotional trauma happening within this body. The body becomes disconnected, and this is a big part of colonization and of white supremacy and of whiteness, is the disconnection from the body, and specifically the disconnection from the lower body. So for all of us, there is a need to move into being embodied. Let our bodies teach us. Let the body awareness that holds on to all, sorry about that, the places where we hold on to all of these ancestral epigenetic memories of trauma within our bodies. Okay, we need to become aware of our bodies and allow our bodies to become some of our greatest teachers and allies. If we are here to awaken our sovereign divinity, to awaken our truest, highest nature, to awaken our Christhood, it must be embodied. We cannot ascend and leave this plane. We are here to awaken and ascend within our bodies so that we can be here to create heaven on earth together. So embodied awareness is an important part of what we need in order to start consciously shaping culture for cultural trauma healing. We are also going to need a heck of a lot of responsibility and integrity. We need to be responsible for our vessels and all that entails. Physically, we need to be responsible within our minds, our mental capacities, our mental memetics, our psychology, our psyche, our subconscious, within our emotions, within our relations. We need to take the responsibility and understand that this disease will not be solved to the degree that we refuse to resolve it within ourselves. We need to be in our integrity and to continue to show up within ourselves and without in ways that make us uncomfortable, in ways that are hard and challenging, because the truth of love will not become the truth of this world if we are not willing to be within the depths of the forgetting of that truth of love. And that is always within ourselves, and how we continue to show up as people who hold different levels of privilege, where we show up in relationship to people who are oppressed in those same areas. That is a part of our integrity and our responsibility. How we show up relationally is a part of how we co-create a different culture. And we need to be committed. We got to be in it for the long haul. We got to stay committed to it, because the disease of supremacy is wicked, and it will try to do anything it can to remain in its place of power and prominence. So we need to be committed to looking within. We need to be committed to loving ourselves. We need to be committed to loving each other. We need to be committed to the liberation of all beings and not fall back into sleepness and into ignorant forgetting. And we need humility. Again, all of us have different ways where we carry this disease within us. And part of recognizing our sovereign divinity is recognizing our power, recognizing what some would refer to as our regalness, our royalty. But there's also a deep humility within the reclamation of our sovereign divinity, and a deep need for us to be humble as we continue to be so imperfect. And we are going to have a lot of mistakes. We're going to mess up a lot as we engage in co-creating a new culture and healing our collective and cultural trauma, and to be humble, to get out of our own way and to really listen, to really, really, really listen, and be willing to know that we don't always know. That is an important part of it, to continue to show up to this work again and again with humility, with the grace of the humble dirt which grows the bounty of all life on earth. May we walk forward with humility. We are also going to need a lot of compassion and forgiveness, within and without. Compassion is the truth of love. If we are to move beyond this disease consciousness that keeps us in separation, we are going to need to have a heck of a lot of compassion. Compassion for others and how they fall short, how they carry the disease unconsciously. Compassion with them as they make mistakes and fall. Compassion with ourselves and all the places we hold this disease. And with that, forgiveness. To forgive others and to forgive ourselves is a powerful alchemy, one that I personally am still learning a great deal on. But I know enough with it to know that it is a key part to how we will co-create a culture that helps us to heal our collective ancestral and cultural trauma. And it is an important part of how we can continue to show up. For if we cannot forgive ourselves, we cannot forgive others, and we will not be able to move forward for any kind of healing for us all. And we need our sovereign divinity. We need to remember who we are. We need to remember that we are spirit. We need to activate our full abilities as conscious creators within this dream. Activate our light bodies. Activate our deep sacred hearts so that we can perform miracles within and without. And as we come together as sovereign co-creators, we will be able to create the dream of heaven on earth that we all seek. I want to introduce you all to a guided practice that I have. That is a tool that we can use to help us facing the disease of supremacy within ourselves and reclaiming our sovereign divinity. Every time we clear out aspects of the disease of supremacy, we are reclaiming aspects of our sovereignty. And this is a tool that I have developed through my own inner work, and is one that I have shared with lots of my clients. As I mentioned before, I have a degree in mental health counseling, and I've worked as a psychotherapist. Presently, I work as a soul purpose mentor, and I also do guided readings for people. And in different contexts that I'm working with people, I will introduce them to this healing method. It is a self-healing method, and it is a method of healing to help us with our liberation, with reclaiming our sovereign divinity. And I affectionately refer to it as MAPS. The acronym breaks down like this. So first, M. M is to mindfully notice what we are experiencing, to become embodied, to become present, to be aware of discomfort, to be aware of bodily sensations, to be aware of our emotions, to be aware of our thoughts. To come into a mindful embodied space is the first part. And once we have cultivated that mindful attention, that mindful noticing, then we move into the A of MAPS, which is to allow. So often, as I mentioned, with suppression and reactivity, we seek to immediately do something with this unease and this discomfort that we have, with this suffering that we have. The goal here is not to do that, but instead to really allow it to be, because we're not going to really be able to shift it and move it if we just continue to engage in the old patterns that we have with it. So we allow this discomfort, this unease, this sadness, this anger, this anxiety, this malice, this disease to be present with us. And as we give it space and we really feel that we are here with it, not moving, that's when we move into the P of MAPS. And that is where we engage in a process of peeling back layers of emotions and beliefs. So for instance, say that as I was sitting mindfully, I noticed this feeling of sadness. And then as I moved into the A and I really allowed this sadness to be present, I started noticing all of these different ways that I experienced the sadness. My first step with the P would be to ask myself, what is this sadness feeling? Immediately I will find a belief that will pop up. Okay, and that could be of no one likes me. Okay, and as that belief pops up, notice another feeling immediately arises. That could, in this example, let's say that's anger, and now I'm feeling angry, and the belief is, it's not okay for no one to like me, right? And we might keep working in this way, peeling back layers of feeling and belief until we inevitably find ourselves at the core. I mentioned as well, we can stop earlier on if we don't go all the way to the core, but if we can get to the core, this is where the power of the alchemy really happens. So it's good to give yourself some space and time for this practice. And at that core, you'll feel it because there'll be a sense of the bottom of it. This is it. This is what I have been trying not to see and not to feel. This is what has been pulling me and twisting me in different moments. And usually it will have something to do with this core belief in unworthiness. Some way of not being enough, of not being worthy of love. And when we get to that core, that core wounding, that core belief. Then we move on to the S, which is to soak with self-compassion. So we mindfully notice our discomfort. We could choose to enter into this even by recognizing there's something that is showing up for me as a repeated pattern. And we can liken this to the disease of supremacy, and we might choose to mindfully notice that and how that shows up for us. So we mindfully notice, then we allow the feeling and experience to be present, and then we peel back layers of emotion and belief. And when we get to the core of it, we then soak with self-compassion. So that can look like a lot of different things. That could look like bringing a hand to your heart. That could holding yourself, bringing a compassionate touch to yourself, bringing compassionate words in a compassionate tone. That might look like you recognize that part of a self-compassion is I need support from another person, reaching out to someone else. It might mean that you are needing to engage in some kind of conscious action for yourself. Maybe you need to move your body. Maybe you need to go touch the earth. Maybe you need to stop delaying on the thing you've been procrastinating on and put yourself into it. It could show up in a lot of different ways, and I think where you will always find the best way for you and how you need that compassion in that moment when you tune in and you listen to your heart. And hopefully this is a practice that's already bringing you more deeply into your heart. Again, those steps, mindfully noticing, allowing, peeling back the layers of emotion, belief, soaking with compassion. I'd like to give you all an opportunity to experience this right now. So with that in mind, I would like to invite you to allow yourself to just turn inward and reflect on some kind of pattern that you may have noticed in your life where you think this disease of supremacy is here. And I would like to encourage you to pick something that's not supercharged, because we don't have a lot of time to really go into that more deeply for everyone, but just something to give you a taste, okay? It could even be like how you were angry at your mom the other day. I want to invite you just to begin to mindfully allow that experience to be present in your body. Start to notice where in your body you're experiencing this situation. What kinds of sensations are a part of it for you? Mindfully noticing your emotions. What kinds of feelings, what kinds of emotions are a part of this situation for you? And mindfully noticing your thoughts as well. Just seeing, are there any particular thoughts that come up? Not following them on the rabbit trails they might like to lead you on, but just noticing what may be there. And now really allowing the fullness of this experience to be present. Not reacting to it as best you can, not pushing it away, dissociating or numbing, just being with it here. Allow it to be as if you were just letting it sit on your lap so you could get a closer look at it. And I want you to start the P part now. So noticing one of the emotions that's really at the surface. Ask that emotion what it's believing. And as that belief arises and takes form, notice a different emotional reaction that you may have to that belief. And again, noticing the belief that comes with the next layer of emotion. I'm going to give you a few minutes here just to be with this part of the process. Go as deep as feels good for you now within the context of this container. Not necessarily about getting to the core at this time, but when you find a place where you feel, yeah, there is definitely a need for compassion here, I invite you to begin to practice the S and to soak yourself in that self-compassion. Some helpful ways to really trigger that can be compassionate self-touch, compassionate words said in a compassionate tone to yourself. Knowing that you are always worthy. Even in the places of pain and suffering, in the places where you hold and harbor this disease, you are still worthy of the love that is. Often a part of the S will also be how we show up for ourselves in aftercare. It's not just this moment. You might need a whole weekend or a whole week or a whole lifetime, probably, of being compassionate to yourself. So continue to be with that as it unfolds, listening, coming back to your body and your heart and your spirit for guidance on that compassion that you need. And so at this time, I'd like to open it up with others. And as I said, this is still something that is evolving, my own understanding. And I welcome feedback as we together engage in the co-creation of our shared liberation for all beings. So if anyone has questions, comments, reflections, considerations, please do unmute yourself and share those as you're ready.
I can share a reflection and maybe kind of a personal experience that this just so resonated with. I actually did a shamanic journey today with a practitioner, and going in knowing there was this deep-seated trauma in me from past physical, emotional abuse from a mentally ill parent, how that has formed me as a human and how that placed certain qualities, like that list going from all the way to the personality, like all of the things built up to form this personality in me. And going through the shamanic process really helped me come back to a place of truth, a place of recognizing the inherent feminine, because most of the trauma was coming from my mother. So the inherent feminine, nurturing, soothing, loving way of being in myself that I wasn't getting from my mother. And so to be able to recreate my personal self so I can show up in this culture as a being of healing that trauma and coming into that place of truth. So that whole diagram that you threw out with the 1 through 12 was just that was sick. That was like, I was just like constantly like, yes, that, yep, that, yep. It's just like, it was such a perfect cycle. And each part of it resonated so deeply with my travels of healing and how I ultimately want to show up in culture. So thank you so much for this beautiful offering. I mean, just such a blessing to be able to be here and to like notice it in my own life and notice it in my community happening and with so many people I know. It's just such a beautiful thing. So thank you, Alicia, my love.
Thank you, Quill. I really appreciate your reflection and your sharing, and I'm really grateful that it made sense, and that diagram I created was a helpful breakdown of that as well. Yeah, in the name of healing memetics, I also want to put something out there and offer that we have this, like, you know, again, speaking of memes, we have this really common memetic in our cultures, but like, oh, sick, right? Like, that's cool, like, that's great, right? What? We're promoting sickness? We're promoting sickness. This is a part of it, right? So a good friend of mine, Alexis, and some of you know him, came up with an alternative memetic, which is to say healthy. So instead of sick, that's healthy vibes. Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing some of your experience as well, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Yeah, go for it, Zan.
I didn't know if we were using the little hand button.
Oh, yeah, I didn't say, sorry.
I'm really grateful for this. I'm really grateful for your, like, the pedagogical frame and the spiritual frame that you've provided for a personal collective journey that we're all on. One of the things that resonated for me was naming that in the lens of this supremacy, this division, this divisive kind of world we've lived in, we become so blind to, like, we're aware of our own personal oppression, we're aware of our traumas, but we're blinded to the benefits that we get from continuing to participate in this irony, viral, it's not irony, it's cosmic. There's a reason there's a virus happening right now. But I kept thinking, you know, about reactions to trauma. There's like flight, fight, and freeze. And I was wondering a little bit about, like, that this intellectual process of becoming aware of how we are participating in this paradigm. And I think, like, this is maybe, there are people who knew about it, but they were in this freeze land. You know, it's like you can know how to eat healthy, but you don't know how to do it. And so I really liked then, so I kept on thinking, what about apathy or just knowing but not doing? And I liked the maps. I think that was awesome because it's not just a skill, it's a method to change how you see things, how you believe. So something. I love this.
Thank you so much for your share and for your reflection. Yeah, absolutely. The trauma responses of fight, fly, right, or freeze, and also one that Kevin Haggerty, which several of you may know as well, introduced me to, which makes perfect sense to me, is fawn. And that's where we are trying to appease our oppressors. Right? I think that this is a really important trauma response for us all to recognize because it is a part of how so many of our ancestors got into the business of becoming oppressors because they were fawning oppressors in order to survive. And so our own personal trauma responses, to the degree to which we are experiencing fawn or freeze or flight or fight, is going to limit our ability to show up for collective and cultural trauma healing, for sure. So there's definitely that link there. And so I think that's another piece of where we can only go so far in being a part of co-creating a culture of healing if we do not do the internal work, because we will continue to show up and repeat that trauma response that we have inside of ourselves, outside of ourselves, unless we contend with it, unless we deal with it. The revolution happens from within, and that is the only way it could ever happen without. Sarah Joy, I think I saw your hand before. Would you like to? Yeah, please.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who just spoke up and reflected. I'm going through multiple transitions of healing or trying to heal from trauma, from relationships to the power culture to the medical. And I tried to just, everything I have is big. So when I did this inner guidance meditation, I had to use something big, but I really found it very helpful and very useful, because I came to a place of I'm not getting dignity, and I want that for everyone. I want that for me and everyone. So first it was the like the extreme sadness and hopelessness, and then it was the anger that we're not all having that in this world and getting that and being treated in that way. And then coming to a place of loving myself more, self-compassion. And I really hear you and agree with that we need to do our internal work first. And I'm finding that more and more in relationships with others, people I've known for years right now, because of all the uncertainty and all the violence and everything we see, that they are expecting me to be a certain way that I didn't have expectations before with even people that I'm close to. And like, I need to show up every day like I used to for them, but I'm trying to take classes for doing my own internal work, and they're, so there's this conflict of people not showing up, and then I'm telling myself I need to open up more and be more compassionate about where they are at. But how much energy do I have if I'm really in a lot of pain in my life? How do I decide about whether and how to continue some relationships that are very draining on me? And how do I deal with the power over in the medical and health system when I'm being sent into a spiral of go to the emergency room, when they're going to just tell me you're not dying in 3 days, go back to your PCP, your primary care. And it just, a year can go by and you have no more healing. So how do I find the words and the voice and the empowerment instead of just shutting down, because the cycle is so harsh, and seeing others also suffering, and that's harsh. And then I'm silent, and then I'm angry at myself for being silent. So I know I need a lot of healing. So I'm just asking for guidance and direction, and saying everything you're saying is what I'm learning from all of the spiritual work and all of the nonviolent communication classes I'm taking. Everything rings true of what the picture you've given. And now I have been trying to do my work and I want to move forward. So
right.
Thanks for a minute.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for sharing some of your story, and my heart goes out to you and your struggles. I've worked with people who have been in that pattern that you're talking about with the emergency room and that lack of dignity and care. And so, I'm sorry that you are finding so much hardship within that, and I understand your frustration. Part of what I think is important to recognize, and this applies to all people regardless of sex or gender, is within the suppression of the feminine energies. That is a part of the disease of supremacy and this holding of the masculine above the feminine. There has also been this exploitation of the feminine. And for many people who are female bodied, they've experienced that very readily. And there is this expectation that you are meant to be very giving of your energy, that the feminine should just be constantly giving and giving and giving and giving and kind and kind and kind and submissive and submissive and submissive, and never fucking stand up for herself, right? Or himself or themself. This is for all people, this aspect of us that is kind and loving and compassionate and feeling, that has been used against all of us. And part of compassion that I think is important within the reclamation of our sovereign divinity, creating cultures of healing, is compassionate anger. Anger is not a bad thing. It's not a bad emotion. Sometimes we really need it, because anger arises when boundaries have been crossed and things are not okay. And so much of what this disease has done is not fucking okay, to us individually, to us collectively. And our anger is justified, our anger is needed. And part of being compassionate within the realm of facing the disease of supremacy is not to continue to allow it to hurt us and to hurt others, but to stand up to it, to recognize that using our anger to say no, to speak back, to draw a line, to call people out, to call systems out, that when we can use that anger, it is actually an act of compassion, because we are showing compassion for ourselves, because we are showing that we care about ourselves, that we honor ourselves, and it's a compassion for this other, because they need to see and recognize the ways that they are being oppressive and abusive. You know, whether that be a system, that be an individual. Moving forward with compassion, anger means moving forward with the love of truth, of spirit, recognizing that this situation is not harmonious and it needs to shift, and anger is a part of the energy which will help it to shift. So that's getting into our power. We need to see the places that we have consistently given up our power and given it away. And for so many of us, it has been this idea that compassion and empathy is we just give, no matter how much we are being taken advantage of or hurt or abused. That's not a part of us moving forward together. Boundaries are important. Boundaries and compassion, anger to enforce those boundaries, knowing that that is done in love for self and other and for us all. Thank you for that question, Sarah Joy. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for that answer. It really opened me up a little more. Thank you.
Good. I'm grateful to hear that. Yeah, I hope and pray you can access more of that fire for yourself, which I know will then help you to access more of that fire for other people as well. Christine? Yeah, I was like, wait, is she, yeah? Okay, please
I'm
do.
saying, Michelle, yes. And I see you doing it. I see you doing it, being that, right? That's part of how we can hold each other in culture. I see you, we're all, like, just hold that. Yeah, you got this. You really do. I just want to say, I was going to call you a badass, but I'm going to call you a good ass. This work is gorgeous. It's truly affirming and also real. So real. And you reminded me, I studied with a theater group in Port Townsend called Poetic Justice, and they work with theater of the oppressed. And when I got there with my white privilege, I was like, I don't like that word oppressed. I don't really like that word. I don't feel oppressed. What the hell? That blind spot was big, just saying. And then we did an exercise where it was a physical, very embodied practice of someone had to like hold you down like this, and you had to get out of it and get away from it. And it was so powerful and real. And it's like, oh shit, that's in me. That shit's in me. So my biggest, I love the maps that you offered. That's such a beautiful step-by-step. And I have my own called CORE, C-O-R-E. So I'll share that with you another time. But what I love is that you're saying we've met the oppressor and she is us. This is not, it's the whole othering. I don't know if you spoke about it. I joined a little late, but this idea of othering is, yes, it's domination, higher, lower. That's all. We know that's just fucked. Okay, that's fucked. But anytime we say, oh, it's about you, we have crossed a line and we are now in that, that place. We are the oppressor, and it's so easy. And all of us, we're spiritual beings. Yes, we're all one, but we do it. And so what I also loved about what you said is the more that we recognize, oh, yeah, it looks like you're doing this thing to me, but you're my mirror. You are me, my brother, my sister, my whatever, non-gender fluid, whatever you are, orange, white, purple, you are me. And that's where the spiritual understanding, we're not taught that. And then I go into a place of fear. Just the last little thing to share is like, it's so weird to be spiritual and people aren't going to get me. And that's why I love your voice in the world and how you're showing up, because damn it, we just got to own it. We just got to own our weird and be like, yeah, right? Hell yes. And this is my truth. And go ahead and, no, don't hang me on that cross. No, I don't even have to go there. That's an old story. That's an old story. I'm going to get fucking crucified for saying this shit. Pardon my French. Whew. No, I don't have to be thrown, cast upon, but that vulnerability that comes from being a spiritual warrior, we got to see it in each other and go, yep. You got this. We got this. I am so honored to know you. Mwah. I adore all of you. Thank you. It's a blessing to share this time with you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yeah, I really appreciate all that you are sharing and bringing forth. And yes, this othering, right? It's an inherent part of it for us to experience other, but to engage in the othering and to put it all on somebody else. And yes, that makes us the oppressor. That was so poignant and beautiful the way you put that. I really appreciate you sharing that. And also you bring up the point of reflection. And I feel really humbled and honored and flattered by the words that you were sharing, reflecting to me, because you are such a woman of strength and truth and of being your own damn unique shelf. I was thinking shell, yeah. Holy shit, and I love that about you so much. And I find you so inspiring in that. And so this is a part of that culture creation as well, for us to come together as we are reclaiming our sovereign divinity and to reflect it to each other and to say, oh, right, I see that in you. I see that in me. I see that in we. I see that in all. Okay. And it's from that place together as we do this inner alchemy that we can come together and cultivate a culture together that is the culture we seek to have. Absolutely.
Shell, yes.
Shell, yes. That's healthy. Yes, wonderful. Thank you. We've got about 10 minutes left. And so if anyone else would like to ask a question, share a comment, share a reflection, please do so.
Sunflower, this has been so phenomenal. Like,
Yeah.
hands down, I think one of my favorites workshops so far. There's been like 25. And you brought in these such key components that were relative to this time in my own life, like dealing with like gender, like being erased as a trans man or like, but like visibly a Black man now. And like, just being alive is feeling, getting up in the morning is hard. Like, it's so overwhelming. Like I'm like lockdown half the time, and then half the time I'm like pushing myself. And you talk about this like internal oppressor, and I'm so glad you reflected, you know, in these ways. You reflected like like I'm like, oh, the supremacy is like outside of me, like all these white people, like, oh, the cops, oh, like, you know, whatever it is, which is real for me, you know. Every single time I pass a cop, I just lock up completely. And it's real. But you spoke to this where we still have privilege and where we still oppress ourselves, and that's so fundamental. And you like Jen was saying, the way that had happened through generations and through your parents creating a personality, you know, and going back to unwind the unworthiness that maybe your parents passed down to you, and that voice, you know, my dad's voice still speaking it through me, and like having to, you know, regardless of anything, like the knowing of oneness and the knowing of like worthiness, despite any mistakes we make or others make, and it's about how to manage them, and creating a culture of managing experiences better. And yeah, I just wanted to speak to that, like from a trans Black voice, of like this really resonated on external level, and brought up like, I turned off the camera and I did some rage work, but like also on this internal level, and like, now that I am a passing man, like what kind of privileges do I have, you know, whether it's a Black man or not, like do I and so far I think I've been navigating that really well, because I do remember what it's like to be a woman. I was a woman for 22 years, and like, yes, I have had like also lots of stuff happen, you know, in the time being a woman, and like, where does that layer over, and how can I bring that into my experience, especially into my interpersonal relationships, of like the compassion, the understanding for all experience, you know, Black, white, gay, straight, also queer, like any experience, like where can we hold that compassion for all? And I'm just like, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with your experience and with your reality, and how you are experiencing the disease of supremacy within and without. And it is such a complex, multi-layered thing, for sure. And I think Christine put it in the chat, and I think that is the best answer: compassion for self and compassion for other. And ultimately, compassion for self first, you know, that old thing we like to talk about within the therapy world of, you know, put your oxygen mask on first, so that you can help other people with theirs. And I know very personally, as I continue to excavate my inner landscape to find the places where I hold on to superiority and racism and genderism and all of these different things, that the degree to which I refuse to have compassion for myself, I refuse to forgive myself, I hold that judgment and that shame, I am repeating that paradigm. You know, that's the antidote. The loss of love, the separation, the division, that needs to be approached with love. And damn, that's really fucking hard sometimes. That's really hard sometimes, within ourselves and without of ourselves. So it's a constant learning. It's a constant learning. And that's where I think, you know, I've been finding in my own journey, and I definitely think other people will agree with this, coming to spirit, because spirit is that greatest source of love, you know? Also coming to your loved ones. I see y'all. Jen and Erica sending the love at each other. Yes. Come and get, you know, drink from the well of those who love you and have compassion for you. That's a place too where when I find I'm having a hard time of finding compassion for myself, I turn to those who love me most, and they always have so much compassion for me, and they help me to remember that I have that compassion for me too. And then that ultimately helps me to have more compassion for other people. And it's just that spiral. We're always moving in that spiral. Compassion, love, melts fear, domination. Shell, yeah. Shell, yeah, it does.
That's the title of the book I've been working on, day and night.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
love melts fear. It does.
I look forward to reading that.
And
Wonderful.
coming to a place where like everybody has access, has their basic needs like met, so they can access this like higher love, because it's totally a privilege to be able to be here and like to be able to connect to our spirit. Because I mean, the last 3 months, it's, you know, it's like when there's so much else stacked up, like that just gets, you're concentrating on survival, you're concentrating on keeping your body safe, you're concentrating on eating food, you know. And if when I was reading The Body Keeps Score about how trauma is held in the body, and my favorite line from that book was, all trauma is inevitably happens because people aren't heard, seen, or accounted for. And like my whole thing I'm holding is like, if we can wake up on a planet where every single person is heard, seen, or accounted for, so that we can like deeply connect to the source, because it is all one, and it is all of us. And I just needed that reminder, and thanks. Sorry.
No, I don't apologize on behalf of any of us. I know we're all grateful for everything that you've brought forth. And I think that's such an important point to make. And how many people in this world, because of this paradigm of domination and control and the way that colonization has spread over the entire globe, do not even have any amount of the socioeconomic privileges that we have as being born in America and living here. And that there are people who are every day trying to figure out, how am I going to get water? And I have to walk 20 miles to go to school. And when I do drink the water, it's going to be super polluted, you know? That yes, like there are so many levels of privilege, and so many levels of oppression, and that it is such an important point that, yeah, we need to really shift the playing field, shift this home for all of us, so that everyone has the opportunity to connect to that truth of spirit within, and not just be stuck in survival mode. And so many layers within this culture, and within, you know, within this society that we live in, and within out of it, that is a difficult truth to come to. It is hard to come home to spirit. And what good motivation then for those of us that do have that privilege to connect with spirit and to be on this spiritual journey in this conscious way, where we're bringing more awareness, to know that the more that we do this and the more that we come within and we figure out how to bring forth more of that love and truth that we are, that we will be it in the world, and collectively we'll create that change, and we will see an end to the mass suffering that has been occurring on our world for so long. And on that note, I noticed that we have come to the end of our time for today. I don't know if anyone else had a burning desire. I don't think so, and I'm not seeing any burning hands. Just burning hearts and burning souls, ready for a fucking change. Oh, yes. We gonna do it with love, yeah. Oh, actually, I do want to, just a parting gift that I'd like to share with you all, which is not something that I share all the time, but it just came forth today to do this. I want to just make a closing offering, closing prayer of sharing my soul song. And this soul song came forth for me when I was working with my first shamanic teacher, Kauia, and she was giving me a lot of initiations into shamanism, and she was teaching me about drumming my power, and she did my first soul retrieval for me. And in the wake of that tremendous shift, I had my soul song come forth. So from me to you, my heart and my soul. Life she's a flowing river, is a flowing river. None are lost, and all are found. All are found, safe and sound. Love is here, it's all around. Round and round we go. Trust the love, it's in the flow. Find your strength in the dream. Allow it all and let it be. When you find what you need, you found your son, and you are free. Thank you all so much for being here, being a part of it, for sharing this space with me, sharing this time, sharing your hearts and spirits, and being a part of all of us co-creating this revolution together, from within to without. Here we go, family. Here we go. Let it flow, because that's healthy, don't you know? Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you all so much. Love you.
Thank you, Sunflower. Thank you so much. Let's go shift culture, people.
Yeah. Woo!
Three.
Thank you. I want to hear everybody's soul songs. That was so inspiring. That was so beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So much love to you all.
Thank you so much, Sunflower. This is powerful. I'm really excited for where this work is going and how you're rooting in the truth and the solidarity in all of our experience of this disease, and to like the framing of it as a disease. I've thought about that and heard that before, and that it's really something that we all can understand is not the truth of who we are. You know, it's something that's come inside of us and taken us over in ways, and we need to mindfully like extract it and work with it and accept it in order to heal it. So thank you for everything you shared with that and the deep work you're offering.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that reflection. And yes, yeah, it makes so much sense to me to have it phrased as a disease, because that's what it is. It's a disease. This is a disease. This is a sickness. We are all sick, family, and we are working on the healing. And yes, oh, go ahead.
Heal, the root of the word heal means whole too. So it's like coming back to oneness.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I will say I am going to be doing more with this work. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one, going deeper with this and how this shows up for you, soul purpose mentoring could be a way. I also provide intuitive tarot oracle spreads. I actually just posted a collective one for the collective for the 2020 summer eclipse portal and the Venus cycle that just has begun, the new 8-year Venus cycle. So that's on my YouTube, and I'll be sharing some of that on Instagram as well, if you follow me there. The Alicia Sunflower and Alicia on a Sunflower Rose on YouTube. And I'm also in the process of creating some online courses to go more deeply into this content. So follow me on the socials, and that would be a great place for you to figure out when that's available, when it is available, up and coming. Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you just for being all that you are, and doing all that you're doing. There's some really amazing people on this call. And special shout out to all of you in Seattle who are a part of the Chaz and that amazing happening. I'm like, my heart is so full of love just watching you guys from afar, just being like, oh, you guys are the best people and you're doing it. So thank you for doing it and being an example for us all of this in action. As we do that healing within, we can come together and do that healing without. So much love.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Blessings, everyone.
Well done, Alicia. I love you. So proud of you.
Thanks.
Love you all. Bye.
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 Bye.